A few years ago, I decided to make a career change. I had a conversation with my mentor, and it went as follows. Diana, guess what? I'm thinking of moving into a new role. Really? Doing what? Sales. What? Are you joking? I guess for a core procurement person, it felt like betrayal. I was going into the dark side. But for me, it felt like the right choice. So today I will share with you my experience of being on both sides of the negotiation table and my experience while transitioning. How many of you work with procurement? A few of you. Okay, some of the insights is for working directly with procurement, but with buyers in general. The mindset is very similar. But let me start with a little bit of background. So when I finished my master's degrees, I started my career as a professional buyer. After a few jobs as a buyer, I realized that I really like the buyers, the commercial element of procurement, but I wasn't so keen on other aspects of the role. So I wanted to make a career change. But before moving, I wanted to be sure where I was going. Marketing? Yeah, that's sexy and fun. No, she's saying no. HR, I like people. Finance, like my father. What about sales? Yeah, people had told me I'm pushy, so maybe I can do that. But before doing that, I thought, let me think about what business do need to be successful. And of course, you need all these functions to be successful. But after reading a few books and watching Dragon's Den, I realized that to stand a chance as a business leader or as an entrepreneur, you need to master sales skills. So I wanted to change. The first obstacle was to convince senior leaders that they should hire somebody with zero sales experience. That took a lot of preparation and network. But after a few interviews and 18 months later, somebody decided to give me a chance. I was very excited. I asked my leader, can I have a cold call course? And I took it, and I was ready to cold call the world. The first year was terrible. I made all the mistakes in the book. I was stuck for too long with some of the clients. Those ones that say, yeah, maybe, call me next month. But they never buy. Has that ever happened to you? Yeah, people nodding. I was not asking for the business. I was holding hopes for a yes to avoid the no. In other words, I wasn't closing. I also started focusing on untapped industries to find the next big thing. There wasn't nothing there. It's obvious to me what they were on tap. I was also not challenging the client because it was so hard to get in that the last thing I wanted to do is to say something that will upset them or scare them away. So I let the buyer have all the power at the negotiation table. And finally, I felt very isolated. When I moved to sales, I found the environment very competitive. So I was working on my own and don't wanted to share what I was doing. I thought that my colleagues would steal my deals. My pipeline was empty, so I'm not really sure what I was worrying about. But anyway, at the end of the first year, I hardly sold anything. And by June of the next year, the pipeline was not looking great. Fortunately, I changed teams, and that team was very supporting. There was an individual in particular that made a massive impact on me, Tim. Tim saw that I was struggling and took me aside for a chat. He gave me some coaching and advice, and we agreed on ongoing calls to exchange ideas. And of course, his technical experience helped me, but what helped me the most was knowing that he has confidence in me. I have trial and fail. I knew what didn't work, but I needed that extra bit of resilience. Tim held up a mirror for me to recover my confidence, my faith, and my positivity. You need that when you're selling, don't you? If you have ever had a bad time selling, you know how important it is to have somebody to cheer you up. And Tim did that for me. So since then, I make sure that I have a buddy or a mentor to help each other along the way. So after this, my performance started to improve, but there were still things to be done. Then I had the opportunity to speak to Diana, my procurement mentor. I told her the issues I was having with challenging the client and closing deals, and I thought she was going to say, yeah, that's happened when you move out of procurement. But she didn't. She looked surprised and asked me, Carolina, have you forgotten that you were a professional buyer? Have you forgotten what goes inside the mind of a buyer? I was so focused on trying to be a salesperson that I forgot what goes inside the buyer's head. I was a buyer. I had been for many years. So here it is. I will share with you some of the things that go inside of procurement in general and buyers. Firstly, the need for education. Have you ever received an RFP or a request for quotation or information and you don't really know why they're asking some information? Let me tell you, it's not you. RFPs are often poorly written. And the reality is because buyers doesn't know what they're buying. Even procurement, they can specialize in certain categories, but they wouldn't know everything that they're buying. The business will ask them to source some products, but they might not be the end user. And the support they give procurement is little. I once remember writing an RFP that was very technical. And I was struggling, even with a lot of research, but I didn't want to ask the business and put at risk my reputation. They would think I didn't know what I was doing. It was my job to source, so I didn't ask. Here is a massive opportunity to salespeople to help educate buyers. You know, you are the expert in the field, so you can educate buyers and help them through the process. You can even help them write the RFP. That will help you build a lot of credibility. And even if they are knowledgeable, they are looking for insights. And that's why sometimes they ask you to come and share what you're doing, what is out there. It's a great way of building rapport. Second point, look hungry, but not desperate. I had plenty of experience negotiating on the buyer side, but none from the seller side. And the first thing I noticed is how quickly I was ready to make concessions for the client. I was so focused on closing a deal that I forgot what I learned in procurement. The moment you offer a discount, or you start throwing things, including the kitchen sink, into your offer, in that very moment, you are devaluing your services or products. It's like sometimes happens in relationships. If one person is more eager than the other one loses interest. Is it not? Sometimes it's good to play hard to catch. That leads me to my next point. Define the boundaries for negotiation. Procurement and some buyers will push, and they will push as far as they can until you say no. Why is that? It's because buyers don't know if they're getting a good deal. They can compare bids, but they don't know how low they can take the price until they push. As a buyer, I will push the supplier until they were ready to walk away. Only then, I will start making compromises myself. And procurement can be very methodical, and some buyers in general are too. They will have a negotiation plan with a rank list on concessions. I learned in procurement that you should never make a concession without asking something in return. That's also valid for sellers. So when you say no, and you say no early, you define the boundaries and the framework for your negotiation. And it becomes like a tango, intense dancing, but with a flowing rhythm. Challenge the client. As I said, I had problems challenging the client. But they are expecting that from you. If you don't ask the right questions, procurement gets nervous. They want to have confidence that you can bring new insights and innovation in the organization. So if you challenge appropriately, that will help you build credibility and rapport. And I'll share with you an example that illustrates all these points. Once, as a professional buyer, I was sourcing online marketing services. So we shortlisted 2 suppliers for a face-to-face pitch. There was the incumbent who was already delivering services in a different category, but already in our books. And the challenger who we didn't know anything about. My favorite was the incumbent, because as a procurement professional, I didn't have to onboard somebody else. I could have one contract, consolidate it, have a better deal, and only have to deal with one supplier as opposed to 2. So I was cheering for them. We gave them both some of our own data to analyze and give us some insights. The incumbent knew us well and made some good points. The challenger went out of their way to show the flaws of what we were doing online marketing. So much so that I was worried that the business was going to get annoyed. But they loved them. And for me, it gave me confidence that I could deliver the service. So I told the incumbent, you know, guys, your pitch wasn't the strongest. But instead of giving us further insights about the data, they offered me a discount. That got me very worried. And when I was negotiating with the challenger, they were holding the ground and making it very hard for me to make any savings, which is part of my role and my objective. But the choice was obvious. I couldn't make a saving at the cost of bad service. So we went with the challenger. Unfortunately, from the incumbent, their inability to challenge us and the fact that I offered a discount gave us the wrong signal. The challenger won because they were courageous on their pitch and because, in my view, they probably have a very good negotiation plan. So last point about procurement. They could be your best sales agent. You have to remember that when procurement recommends you to their own business, they're putting themselves at risk. They're putting their name and reputation behind you. So they will be the first one to give you feedback and to promote you, to make you shine within the organization. Conversations with procurement can be tough, and I was a tough buyer. I'm paying it now. But once I have awarded the supplier, I will be the first one to endorse them and guard them. So take the opportunity to make procurement your promoter. So once I start paying attention to all these things, my performance went through the roof. And by the end of the second year, I end up top sales in my team with 300% against my target. It wasn't an easy road. And that leads me to my last point. Being in sales is tough, isn't it? I came to appreciate the amazing job that sales ladies like you and gentlemen do. It's hard. And I told you the reaction I had from Diana when I told her how I was moving into sales. That made me feel I needed to apologize, not just with procurement, but with everybody about what I was doing. I felt like people were looking at me as a cheeky used car salesperson. But now that I'm in sales, I realize how integrity is an essential part of being successful. So I'm very proud of being in sales. It is a challenging and honorable profession. So in summary, it was a great move from procurement to sales. I learned the power of having a network, and people have been mentioning today in many aspects of your life. So if you don't have a mentor or a buddy, make sure you get one. There's plenty of people around here. You learn a lot of skills, but you also have somebody to help you maintain that positive mindset in those tough days that we often have. Also, in regards to buyers, be ready to educate, challenge, and don't be afraid to say no earlier. With a negotiation plan, that will help you hold your ground. And there are plenty of templates in the internet if you haven't used one before. Try it and see how it goes. Then you will turn procurement into your promoter. So before I give you my final thoughts, I'd like it to open to questions if you have any. There's a mic.
Sorry. So, would you mind coming to this microphone? Sorry. Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Excellent, really good, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Glenn.
I don't think this works. Is this working?
Yes.
Yes.
So, could you give us some insight into how procurement assesses value when they're receiving bids or trying to negotiate for a new product or service? How detailed the assessment of value is?
Yeah, you're meaning more like soft things as opposed to measurable things, right?
No, measurable things too.
Measurable things,
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So procurement will have, and it varies, and there's a various degrees of maturity in procurement. So you'll have procurement organizations that I would say are very mature and are mainly doing admin jobs. And then you have very developed and strategic procurement organizations with defined category strategies. But in general, when they're sourcing, they try to be objective by having a template with all their scoring criteria. And they will build it in sections and put questions against it. Will the supplier was able to deliver insight? Was the supplier competitive in price? And things like that. And then they will assess that themselves, but will also give it to the business, their internal business, to mark, so that they can come with a measurable and more objective. Now, at the end of the day, if it's very close, it goes to subjectivity, and there's a lot of how I felt about the supplier, because I have seen bids where there's a clear in-paper winner, but the feeling is that somebody else is better, and you'll go for the other one.
I guess it goes back to that thing of people buying from people, doesn't it?
Yes.
Sometimes you can have the best product, but if you've presented badly or perhaps you've rushed to give a discount because it's end of quarter, I think we've all been slightly guilty of that, then it can discredit you. Any other questions at all? Can you come over to the microphone? Just want to make sure that the camera can pick up your question. Thank you.
Yeah, actually leading on from that, I wondered if you could give us insights on how procurement are measured.
Okay.
So, from their own performance.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the first things that procurement is measured on is savings. So that's why procurement is always going to push very hard, because the lower they get, the bigger the saving, and they are meeting their targets, which are also very tangible. But there's not the only thing, and procurement, and I go to a lot of procurement conference, procurement is trying to move away from that because they want to make sure that they bring value. So other things that are measured on is the value and how happy is the business with the procurement function. So they are very, very worried about the reputation internally, which was one of my points earlier. But they will be measured also in some things like how many suppliers are out there. Procurement hates having multiple suppliers. It's a lot of risk and it's too much to manage. So they always try to consolidate. Hence, I was cheering for the incumbent because I didn't want a new supplier. But at the end of the day, if that supplier was not good enough, you move elsewhere. So things like savings, number of suppliers, number of POs that had been created and paid, because supplier doesn't want to be paying without a PO created. They want the business to follow a process, but also how much they are recognized internally, how much the business appreciates the value of procurement. And it's very interesting to think about that dynamic, because procurement could be an influencer or also a decision maker. And as I said, the reputation is at risk. So you can help procurement shine. And if you do that, they'll love you.
Yeah, it's really interesting points. Do we have any other questions at all? Oh, yes, please come to the mic. Thank you.
Hiya.
Hi.
You spoke about not giving away and holding out the deal. Have you had any situations where you've held out too much and actually lost the deal? And how have you come back from that?
I always ask myself the question, and recently I have a situation where we were debating, and my sales colleagues were like, no, let's throw this, let's throw it. Like, no, let's hold our ground. But I obviously, as a salesperson, I get nervous, then I hold it too much, and then we lose it. What I'm going to say to my boss, right? It's not going to be a good story. But actually, in that specific situation, we hold up and this is why a negotiation plan is so important. You hold up, and if you have to concede, it's fine. It's not that you're not going to concede, you have to concede, but you do it in measures, and then you test how that reacts. You can always come back. If you feel you're losing it, then you can do your last attempt. But I always hold and then do measure increments, if that helps.
Oh, yes, we have a question at the back there.
So I did miss the first few minutes, so I'm sorry if you already addressed this. But I always hear the phrase, don't answer an RFP unless you were involved in creating it. And so I guess sort of a two-part question, what do you think about that? And also how do, as a salesperson, do we make sure we get in with the procurement discussion? Because often if you're dealing with a buyer, maybe they don't even want to introduce you to procurement until the very end. Does that make sense?
Okay, so the first part of the question, yeah, I have heard that, if you haven't helped build the RFP, don't do it. I guess it's all matter of resources, because if you have the resources to do it, if it's saying yes to that RFP doesn't mean that you're missing out somewhere else. I think it's still worth doing it, because even if you don't win it, you learn from the client, and when the next RFP comes, you probably have a better chance. But if it's a matter of, if I answer this RFP, I won't be answering this other one, then, and that one is a critical one, then I'll go for the other one. And the second part of the question was?
As salespeople, how do we make sure we get the kind of proactive relationship built with procurement so that we can be part of the creation process?
Yeah, and I think that this is a good question, and leads back to the part of education. Procurement, and part of their role is going out and knowing what's there and bring innovation. So the business is expecting that procurement is going to help bring innovation. So they ask procurement, oh, do you know any suppliers? And then procurement needs to find out if there's a supplier that can do X and Y. So they will be going out. So that's an expectation from them. And it's a way of start building that rapport way before the RFP, to your point as well, right? And obviously, as salespeople, we will proactively reaching out to procurement. And it not necessarily needs to be to sell them something now. Depends how long is your sales cycle. Mine is very long. So I could be reaching out just to have an informal conversation, talk about how, in general, the industry is going, and then build rapport from there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions before closing remarks? No? Okay. I have one question.
Okay.
So you've made the leap from being a professional purchaser into sales. What advice would you give somebody else making the leap where they don't necessarily have sort of a proven track record into something? What can you do to make that leap successful, I suppose? Yeah,
I think, looking back, first is getting somebody to trust that you will be able to deliver. And that took me a long time and meeting a lot of people to understand what it was required for me, and then get somebody, to get some sponsors and finally make the leap. So if you're making and changing careers, whatever that is, it will require a lot of networking and preparation. It's doable. Once you're transitioning, it's back to the point of getting a support network, because you can bounce ideas and you can learn from other people's experience. They've been done that, they made mistakes, so you can avoid those mistakes by networking with them. So I think that would be my advice.
Brilliant, thank you. Did you have any closing remarks?
Yeah, just some closing remarks. I just want to say that I'm still in touch with Diana. We are very good friends, because she saw me grow in procurement, leave procurement, and then struggle with procurement. And last time I met her, she told me, somehow reluctantly, Carolina, I didn't know where it would lead you, but I have seen how much you have grown as a business leader. She said, I admit that having seen your journey, I appreciate the importance of the sales profession. And I totally agree with Diana, and I tell you why. Salespeople like you remove obstacles, create business opportunities where there are none. You are driven, nimble, and flexible. You have the creativity to find new ways of making it happen. You are resilient and don't throw in the towel in the face of challenge. You are constantly rejected and still carry on. You put yourself at risk. And you're ready to challenge the client and also to challenge your organizations internally. So today, whilst my mind is still of a buyer, my heart is in sales. Thank you.
It's good to hear. Thank you.
Thank you.